Okay, so I think it's time to start, and I think we are the few proud survivors to the end of the talk. I thank you all for coming to this. This is my talk about Fedora Next, and I've given versions of this talk at the last two conferences I've had over the last month, so it's been a lot of exciting travel for me. And so I'm going to start with, the first time I gave this talk at FOSDEM, I very badly misjudged the audience, and I gave the talk at kind of a high level, here's what's going on in Fedora, and then it turned out that everyone in the audience was a Fedora user, and 90% of them were Fedora contributors, and so I thought it went really smoothly, and I got to the end and there were no questions because I had said nothing that was interesting to anybody. So I'm going to start with this. How many people here are Fedora users? Okay, so we've got the same kind of everybody's Fedora users thing here. How many people are Fedora contributors? Okay, so a little more users, a little smaller in the contributors. All right, so I'm going to go through my slide deck, which I've revamped from that, and I revamped it for the next one. This is all new slide deck here with a few repeat slides. I'm going to go through this, and if I need to slow down at some point, slow me down, and I'll leave a lot of room for questions at the end. We start off with the introductory autobiographical slide. I'm Matthew Miller. I work at Red Hat. I've worked there for about almost 3 years now, and for the last 9 months or so, I've been the Fedora Project leader. Before that, I was a sysadmin for, I don't know, 15, 20 years, something like that, and mostly at Boston University and at Harvard University School of Engineering and Applied Science. So I have some background with not huge scale, but larger academic computing kind of things, high performance computing and so on. And I got into Fedora from that direction. A lot of people did in the beginning days of Fedora from the sysadmin side of things. This is one of those things where I'm up here thanking the Academy. I'm going to talk about things that we did a lot in Fedora, and I'm not really taking credit for it personally. There are so many people to thank and hundreds of people who are involved in all the things that I'm talking about, and I probably will mention some people by names, but I will probably forget to mention those names more often than not, but there are a lot of people who deserve credit and thanks for all these things. So here are the too long didn't pay attention version of the talk here. It's kind of what I'm going to talk about. Everything is awesome. It's my first thing to talk about some of the things that the current state of Fedora and why we're doing so well. Then a little bit about the dark times of the past few years, what kind of brought about this Fedora Next thinking. The sort of Flock conference that we got into, and sort of we were looking into, what should we do about these dark times that we felt like we were having, and the kind of the Fedora Next idea and the changes those are, and a little bit about what those changes are, and some about kind of lessons I learned in trying to implement them. Then I'll finish up with everything is awesome again, and then some more questions. So as promised, everything is awesome, and these are some, we just had the Fedora 21 release, and here we got some really good press for this, so especially if you're a Fedora contributor, you should congratulate yourself on this. I'm not going to read all the quotes, but look at those nice quotes. Look more nice quotes. Everybody loves us. And also I really was impressed, Ars Technica did a really nice review, and they really kind of got some of these ideas of what we're doing, I think, in the project, and I was really happy with sort of the way our messaging has gotten out there. So that's the everything is awesome current state of things, and it will come back to that at the end. But so let's talk about the dark ages here. This is kind of Robin Bergeron did a talk about DevOps, and one of the things she talked about was blameless retrospective, where you look back and you don't talk about whose fault that was, but you look at how things came out. So this is actually a Google Trends search for Fedora, the operating system. Not Fedora hats. They do some sort of Google magic to filter that out. And we start back in 2004 and go up to now, and there's a general trend of down. The axis here is magical Google units, so we don't exactly know it's being measured, but something there. So that kind of general trend, and if you look at a bunch of other places, like our friends at Distrowatch, you see the same kind of general down. So that had a lot of people very, very concerned about what was going on in the Fedora world. And so looking at some of our own numbers here, this is another graph that I don't have any axes on, but it's basically connections to our Yum database, basically people getting software updates, which we is a terrible metric, but it's the only metric that we really have tracked back all of that time. So it's a metric that we have. Each little spike here is one of the Fedora releases, and we've got well, that one that's high up there is Fedora 14. So counting back from there, I think that's 9, 10, 11, whatever. No, later numbers than that. And then, so then we got to this period of Fedora 15 here, where I will use my magical invisible finger laser pointer. We can see that usually people, go to the next release pretty soon after it comes out. But when Fedora 15 came out, it never ever became more popular than 14. It was a very bad uptake in that release. And again, I said I wasn't going to point blame. There's a lot of different theories about why that was. It was a release with a lot of change. We had the first GNOME 3 release was there. The first Systemd release was there. And it may also be some sort of artifact of our statistics gathering. We don't actually know what all happened there. But again, it really caused a lot of people to feel panicked. So we had a little bit of a period of talking about, what's going wrong in Fedora, how can we fix it, and this sort of started at our FudCon conferences, Fedora users and developer conferences, where we kind of got together and said, okay, this is really all going wrong, and everybody had all sorts of different ideas, and but we didn't quite know what to do about it. I'm going to throw out a couple slides of things that I think were changes in the world, that some of the things that were the situation in Fedora that kind of led up to this. One of these is just this idea of over here is the world of software, and over here is Linux distributions down in the corner. I don't know if you can see down in the corner, we've got Tux with a sandcastle there. And so over the years, it has been the case that Linux distributions do this work of taking the software out there and kind of making a really nice set of packaged universe for there. Meanwhile, the internet exploded while we were working on that, and so there's a gigantic world of, this is my next slide here. This slide is a year out of date, so it should be even more disproportionate than this. Over again, I don't know if you can see the corner there. This is actually pixel for pixel, the number of packages in Fedora versus the number of repositories on GitHub. So a lot of that stuff on GitHub is terrible, and a lot of it's badly licensed, but it's a huge world of open source software. And so even if we think, if we take the 90% of everything is crap rule and say 99.9% of everything on GitHub is crap, there's still, even if you shrink that down by that much, a much bigger square. There's this gigantic universe of open source enthusiasm and development that we are not capturing in Fedora. So that is kind of a concern, and I think it sort of points to why that line is trending downwards. It's not really necessarily that in absolute terms interest in Fedora is going down, but interest in everything else is going up so much, and it's just we're not sort of the center of the software universe, even the open source software universe anymore, which is actually bad because our mission in Fedora is not to produce a little perfect distribution sandcastle. It is to lead the world of free and open source software development. And if we are off in our own corner doing a sandcastle, we're not leading that very well. So another problem here, this is our QA and release engineering here, or at least they started to feel that way, where we were putting out a release every 6 months, and they're very busy doing a lot of manual labor and no time to actually make the processes better or improve tooling or things like that. So that became very frustrating to the people working in those areas. They felt like the release was just churning out, and we weren't really thinking about what we were doing very much. So that's another one of the sort of problems we recognize as one of the issues. Next one, I said I came from a sysadmin background, and a lot of people in the Fedora project did, but over the years, Fedora has developed as in many ways, a desktop operating system, and that became somewhere in 2008 or so, the decision to sort of focus on the desktop as the user base for that. But there were still a lot of people who were using Fedora on servers. There are a lot of people using Fedora in crazy server production capacity. But as the project, as sort of the focus became desktop, a lot of the people who were sysadmins in the project started to feel like their role was basically to say, no, stop breaking things. You want to get rid of the advanced storage configuration. you're ruining it. Stop it. You want to make this, get rid of the firewall. What are you thinking? That's not not a good choice at all. And so there's a lot of it got to the point where the people who come from a sysadmin server background in Fedora kind of felt like being the stop energy was their contribution to Fedora, and that became frustrating to everybody on every side. Those people became frustrated. The people trying to build a desktop operating system became frustrated, and nobody was winning. So that was another one of the problems. We had quite a bit of strife over that. So another problem, this is a whiteboard thing I did of all of the different groups in Fedora. These aren't individual people. These are little groups and subcommittees in Fedora, and I drew all this, and I think I'm missing about 20 from this list. You don't actually have to read the whole thing. So we got the Fedora Board, we got the Fedora Engineering Steering Committee, the Fedora Ambassador Steering Committee, and all these other different little subgroups and things that were there. So there's a very kind of crazy mix. And so even when we recognized some of these problems, it really became hard to identify how are we going to get the right people together to talk about what they are and get everybody on the same page of what the problems are and try and develop something to fix them. And then meanwhile, see, I have a mostly blank slide. The nominal top-level organization of Fedora is the Fedora Board, or was the Fedora Board. I'll get to that in a little bit. And it kind of felt to a lot of people like the Fedora Board acted like a very far-away Supreme Court that would basically not really be involved in the day-to-day action of things. And then if something really egregious came up, they were there as kind of a last resort body to give a ruling on whether something was or was not okay. And those often came down to a way that feel like kind of a Delphic oracle giving a pronouncement about something that was kind of halfway related to what the original problem was in sort of a general way. And so that's kind of a caricature. It's not quite fair. I think there was a lot of great people working on the board and doing a lot of good work, but it also kind of felt kind of disconnected, and it wasn't, just going back to the previous slide, it wasn't really solving this problem. So when we kind of worked on some things, so like this is what we want to do in the project, there wasn't anybody to say, okay, we're taking this and we're going with it. This is what we're doing in Fedora now. So that kind of became a problem. So the Flock conference, this is a picture of the Flock conference. This is one of the things that's sort of devised to be a solution from this. So Fedora has had a number of conferences annually, usually the FUDCons, Fedora User and Developer Conferences, and the FUD part's a little bit of a computer geek joke. It's contra FUD, you see, I guess that's the thing. But so instead of doing that, we decided to have this thing called Flock, which is the idea this would be a global conference where we would really focus on planning and on bringing developers together to talk about what we were going to do to solve these problems and sort of make the future of Fedora. We had this is actually it alternates between Europe and North America now, and we still actually have in Latin America and Asia Pacific we have FUDCons as well, because we tend to have a pretty wide user base there and smaller contributor base. It'd be awesome to grow the contributor base, but fly the contributors from those areas into the Flock conference as well, so they can join us. So at the Flock conference, we talked about some of the things that we could do to improve things. And so one of the things, I think a lot of people who are Fedora users are aware, the Fedora 21 release took a year rather than the normal 6-month cycle. And so this is back to the QA thing. I don't really have a great picture for QA automation, but I like this anyways. One of the things we did was we took an extra, it turned out to be about 6 months, to work on QA tooling. So we have some new, the fruits of that are going to come out later, but we have some new things that improve the state of QA automation. So that's one of the things I talk about Fedora Next. It's kind of behind the scenes, but in order to enable a lot of the things we want to do to grow Fedora, we need to do a lot more automation. And I know our friends at OpenSUSE are doing amazing things with with their build system that are really cool. We have in Fedora, I saw a talk at FOSDEM about the stuff they're doing with automated QA, and one of the things I noticed was they're talking about something like 700 package builds a week going into that system, and in Fedora we have about 20 times that. So we have a different scale. So that's our excuse for being slow, I guess. But we have some problems to figure out there. But we're working towards getting the automation there. Another thing I brought to Flock was this whiteboard drawing. This became this idea for Fedora rings. One of the ways to get, and again, Sue says beat us to this. It's awesome. One of the ways we have these something like 20,000 source packages in Fedora, and all of the policies apply to them the same. I'm going to go through these things kind of fast because hopefully I think people have heard a little bit about all this by now. But the idea is if we apply different policies to the different parts of the operating system, we can maybe treat things differently. So things that are essential to getting the system booted, we want to have a high level of QA there. If you have some sort of package that is a web app or something like that, maybe we don't care if you've done such a good job, and if it has some bugs there, it doesn't need to hold up everything. And right now we don't really have a way of distinguishing. Everything is the same level of importance. That has some great value. You can know that you can trust your Fedora packages to be of certain quality. It also has some problems because it means that we have a lot of things that gigantic GitHub square that often can't be in Fedora because there's no big incentive to get it into Fedora, so there's no way for us to tap into that. So sort of splitting our policy out like this will help us do that. We're not there yet, but that's one of the ideas I brought there. Another thing Stephen Gallagher brought, and this is something, yeah. Geoth, just enough operating system. That's basically very minimal operating system, just enough, and you can argue about what just enough is, but there it is in the circle. So this is one of the things that's very visible in the Fedora 21 release. We actually, and I'll show this in my final Everything is Awesome slide. We split things up into having a separate cloud server and workstation editions, and this is specifically to address that grumpy cat picture I produced before, because with this we have an actual thing that people who are interested in Fedora as a server operating system and as the upstream for RHEL server operating systems this is where you can focus your energy in a positive way. And if you think that you don't care about the desktop, or you think that the desktop team is going off and doing something that is detrimental to what you're doing that has nothing to do with the desktop anyways, you can just say, you know what, I don't care, that's fine. This is somewhere I can focus my energy in a positive way, and that's been really successful. And the cloud thing is something Fedora, I've been working on Fedora Cloud, and we have a really nice minimal Fedora Cloud image that I think not very many people were using, which is kind of unfortunate. There wasn't really much of a sales pitch reason for it, and it wasn't very visible. So having this split out lets us do a lot more experimental things in the cloud space. So Fedora Atomic is first launched in the cloud, and that would have been kind of impossible before as a monolithic Fedora because it's really doing things a lot differently. You don't install things via RPM on an Atomic system, for example. And then the workstation kind of lets the desktop team have a really focused development. In this case, they've chosen software developers. So if you are a software developer, this is sort of the target idea that this will be the best desktop for software developers. I saw the statistics for people connecting to the network here. It's like 43% Apple. And so the goal is that I guess you can keep your Apple hardware, but we'd like you to be running Fedora on it. We'd like to have people who are using the Mac for whatever reason for their doing software development that's not on Fedora. They're working on it for their day jobs. We'd love Fedora to be the best operating system for them. So that's the target there. And again, splitting that up from being the general distribution lets them make decisions that they really feel are best for that use case, even if the wider Fedora community might think that's not necessarily the best default, but we can say, okay, but for our target user base, that's what is best. So these were some things we talked about as Fedora Next, and we actually went to the Fedora board with a lot of these proposals and got them officially approved and stamped and started doing them. And then about January, you got a question there? Yeah, so the question was, is this based on Atomic? And also the relationship to OpenStack. No relationship to OpenStack at all. In this case, we decided mostly to focus on the guest image. And, excuse me, I know, talking too fast. All right, let me. Yeah. So the idea is, if you know the pets versus cattle metaphor. Does everybody know the pets versus cattle metaphor by now? Sort of the idea that some servers you take care of as if they're your pets, but cloud servers are basically like factory farming, and you just give them numbers and you don't care anything about them as individuals. The idea is that Fedora Cloud addresses that cattle case. And so as it exists right now, we have a Fedora Cloud base that is just a sort of a minimal but traditional OS with RPM and everything like that, and then also Fedora Atomic, also under the same cloud umbrella. I think that in the future we're going to use Atomic for more things, including the pet servers and probably the desktop as well. That's speculative future, but it'll probably grow out of being a cloud sub-project. Man, I don't know. My voice was fine until I got up here and started talking. I don't know what that's about. So we started doing those things, and then suddenly I noticed we had this community reaction, which was actually surprising to me because I thought I'd done a lot of due diligence in talking to people and going to the board, getting this accepted, and everything. You know, these different things of the splitting things up, the Fedora rings, and you know the QA delay. And I realized that I had done kind of a terrible job. So this is one of my lessons that I learned there, and so. After realizing that it kind of gone off track there and kind of ended up with a lot of people feeling kind of upset about the way things were going, it was time to do things differently. So I ended up talking a lot. That's my solution to things. I don't know if it's the best, but I ended up, over the past year, I started a thing called 5 Things in Fedora this week. If you haven't been following that, I post on Fedora Magazine every almost week, usually on Tuesday through Friday-ish. And in retrospect, I think I should have done 3 things in Fedora this week, but I've done pretty good at finding basically 5 items of interest that I just post about in just like a paragraph about every week. I've been, so much water has been provided to me. Awesome. Yeah, I'm sort of just, because one of the things I really noticed is that we have a big problem with communication in Fedora, a lot because we have all these little different communities. And so one of the problems that I think hadn't really been identified as an issue when we were looking at all the problems kind of came up once we started to try and do things to fix it, which was this communication problem. So I've been trying to talk a lot, both at conferences and podcasts and things, and the Fedora Magazine. And I've talked to Mo Duffy and the websites team about sort of a new vision for the Fedora website. So I know if you've looked, this is part 2 of it. The part 1 of it is if you look now at the Fedora Project or the getfedora.org website. It's kind of a brochure site meant for people who just like, I just want to get Fedora. I don't want to get mired into the whole, what is this project thing. So that's part 1. The part 2 is kind of a website that feels like a home for the Fedora community. So right now, if you want to look at what is the heart of Fedora Online, the answer is probably it is the Fedora Develop mailing list, or probably IRC channels, and both of those things are scary. And even if you're a Fedora developer, it's an overwhelming amount of information. If you're a casual user, there's no way you can possibly keep up. So we wanted to develop something that kind of feels more like a modern web-based experience that is sort of the heart of Fedora, and so hopefully that'll be something we'll have in the next foreseeable future, and to help and try tie the community together. The next thing we did, also related to that, was to migrate from this Fedora board that kind of was mostly a governance body that would make sure that there were no big contention for resources, and again, it sort of have a stewardship of the values, to a new thing called the Fedora Council, which I put here not just because we're very silly, but because it is a consensus-based roundtable sort of governing body, which is a change from the way we've done things before. I didn't have a good picture for the rest of it. I'm just going to talk for a little bit. So the Fedora Council, like the Fedora Board, retains governance responsibilities. It is still the top-level body of the project. But instead of having a kind of nebulously designed governance role, it has an active charter for leadership, where the idea of the Fedora Council will help set the direction for the project and help find people to implement those directions. So that will hopefully in the future make it a little more clear that, when a decision has been made, that really was the project speaking. And one of the things that is hopefully going to help make this happen is that the default decision making is something that comes from the Apache project and other open source things of lazy consensus, where we don't vote to do things, but the default is you do things as long as nobody objects. And if anybody objects, we stop and we talk about it, and then we make sure that there's agreement before we move on, but that the focus is on motion rather than on making sure you collect votes, because the voting-based process for decision-making often kind of ends up focusing on the voting rather than on the agreement. So that's something we're working on as kind of an experiment. And one of the important things as well is that we actually require full consensus for important decisions. And so this council, previously, the board was basically elected and appointed positions in a mix. Red Hat appointed positions and 5 elected positions, and then the Fedora project leader had full veto over everything. In the new model, we've got basically 6 full members. 2 of them are elected at large. 2 of them are hired by Red Hat positions. And then 2 of them are meritocratic. They're selected by the Fedora engineering side, and another one by sort of the outreach side of Fedora. And every one of those people has a full voice in the consensus. So if somebody, one of the elected people says, this is really going wrong, it's not just a 1 minus 1 and then, whatever, plus 5 from everybody else, and no one cares. We really want to stop and talk and make sure that everybody's on board with the direction. So we think that having that really strong consensus model really will help also in people understanding that these are community decisions that we're making to go forward. And the other thing that's important in this, I think people have noticed that Fedora project leaders don't last very long. We've gone through quite a few of them, and one of my goals is to not get horribly burned out. I don't know if that's crazy or not, but Robin in particular in her tenure spent a lot of time getting things set up so that the next person wouldn't get burned out. And in this new design, a lot of the Fedora project leader responsibilities are kind of shared across that council in a way that hopefully will benefit me in a nice personal way. So one of the most important charters of this Fedora Council is to select Fedora objectives, which are basically 12 to 18 month things that we want to accomplish, like this idea of having the 3 Fedora editions, something that's a big change that reaches across the project, and find one person to be the lead for that, and that person can have status updates. Yes, Thomas?
So just to be clear, there's 3 versions. There's the cloud, the server, and the
yeah.
workstation, but there's still the spins, right? There's still a
yeah. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. So basically, we've taken these 3 things that are they're basically our super spins that we've said these are the ones we're really going to focus the project resources on. And there's a process by which we could add another one. There's a proposal for an Internet of Things one as well. So when we find something that seems like it might be a really good target that will be kind of a broad target, we might want to add that as well. Some of the spins are basically focused on technology showcase, like the KDE spin is a pretty good representation of what KDE is, where its idea for Workstation is that it should be something that is it's audience focused rather than it happens to be GNOME based, but it's not really meant to be. This is a GNOME showcase. We're using GNOME as the best way to get this audience. Yeah. Right. So yeah, this is getting into some of the details, but it's a good question. Does having these 3 different things lead to a possible fragmentation? Possibly. I think we are a big enough project. We've got room for some of it, but we also have something called the base working group, where their job is sort of to deal with what is the commonality between these things and to encourage people to work from a common base as well, and to take some ownership of the common level as well. Some of this stuff I've been talking about in my left blank slide is stuff we're still working on. The council's still kind of getting off the ground, and I've been doing all this traveling and talking, and that slows down actually doing things, it turns out. So, anyways, but back to the everything is awesome here. So this is the full version of that chart that I showed a little chunk out of before, and it starts all the way. That's Fedora Core 6 over there in the purple there, and 8 is a strange aberration that we do not have a good explanation for why it is that really high one there that is tapered off there. There was some problem with where it would check in for yum metadata like 8 times a day instead of daily, so possibly that's that. But these numbers are also only counting one connection a day, so it's a mystery. But so I say just ignore 8 in the numbers. Who knows? But the important thing here is that over here in Fedora 20, that we're back up to the levels we were before by whatever metric this is. And the Fedora 21 here is this tiny little blue line at the edge, has already surpassed the Fedora 20. So we're not having another tragic Fedora 15 situation, whatever that was. So I think we're doing good on the numbers here again. I want to work on some ways to get some better metrics because basically you measure something and then you can improve it, and we have not been doing a very good job about measuring. So that's one of the things I would really like us to kind of make an objective. It's one of the things I hopefully will argue for as an objective for Fedora is better counting of all the things we could make better, and that includes the downloads and things like that, but also diversity in the project and a lot of other things that could really benefit us. This slide is also a lot of guesswork here, but this is ISO downloads, and I didn't put numbers on it because it's rough enough that numbers would be a little bit dishonest. But workstation is still the majority chunk of the pie. Here is a big workstation download. This is ISO downloads, and then the server, though, I think. I feel a little bit validated here because a lot of people are saying nobody cares about Fedora Server. It turns out at least 15% of people care about it, and so that's a pretty good chunk. And this is another thing that I didn't have a metric for, but the Fedora Server mailing list is something that I've been subscribed to for I think 10 years, and it's always been 3 or 4 messages every 6 months, and now it is a very busy mailing list. So this has worked at starting up the Fedora Cloud thing. When I came on to Red Hat, the cloud, some of the initial people who worked on doing the cloud image had left, and it was also kind of languishing. That is also a really active group, and even the desktop mailing list had been kind of quiet, and now it is also active as well. So I think we've really done a good job of getting those sub-communities started up again. Yeah, so the cloud image is about 5% of the downloads, and so I don't know what that means, because hopefully that means that some people have downloaded it, imported it to their OpenStack, and launched 1 million. And this doesn't even count our AWS usage because we have no way of counting that very well. So there it is. So that's pretty successful. And then there's the KDE and XFCE spins are also about 3% and 2% respectively. And then there's some other stuff. The Fedora Robotics project is awesome, but I think it gets like 20 downloads. But of those 20 downloads, one of them wins the World Cup for robot soccer every year. So the impact is high. And then in the future, a little bit, one thing I noticed is the actual Back to the Future day where they go to at the end of Back to the Future is basically our release date for Fedora 23. It's like it's real close, so I'm going to lobby very strongly to make sure we hit exactly that day for the next Fedora release. Someone mentioned Fedora Atomic before. I think we're going to have a lot more of this. This is very interesting technology, and I think it's the future of the operating system in general. I don't know what it all will mean, but we'll find out. And then questions. Binshell.
You said there's speculation on why people didn't like the
Wow.
Was there ever any investigation on why people still continue to use it?
People kept. Yeah. So one of the things, there's another version of that chart which I don't have, which is a stacked graph there. And if you look at that, it basically stays level. So it wasn't really that people fled from Fedora in droves. They just didn't upgrade to that release. It was a little bit too scary for them or something. So I don't know. I I think we have a pretty loyal community. I guess that'd be my answer to that. Yeah.
I'll give my personal feedback on that. I think I was stuck on Fedora 17 for multiple reasons. As got to leave his family, going on an upgrade, going on that whole process that involved with that. So I think the extra time for the release was helpful, at least for me, knowing all right, I'm not going to do this in 6 months. That type of situation. So I'm looking forward to everyone. Great so far. And then a question.
People ask that, but nobody wants to do it. So I think a lot of these things take a lot of effort, and Fedora Mobile in general would I wish the Ubuntu people the best of luck with that, but without having things like hardware deals and things like that, it seems like really like a tilting at windmills kind of thing. Let's knock some windmills down. Yeah. Right. We're looking at being, 4th place after BlackBerry, if at your best possible, I guess 5th place because there's Windows in there. Yes, Symbian, like WebOS, and there's so that's hard. Yeah. Now that said, Adam Williamson, one of our QA guys, has a Fedlit spin or remix that's basically Fedora for tablets. So there's some kind of cool hobbyist stuff going on for there, but I don't think that we're ever going to have the resources. It would take more resources than all of Fedora to do that successfully. There's been some interest in a Fedora for networks recently. I don't know, this kind of came out of the blue, but several people from different directions have approached me about having a Fedora for running on network switches and running.
Well, with Facebook just having that open switch architecture, I don't know if you guys saw that.
Yeah.
It's like an open hardware enterprise class switch that's stackable. It's tray based. You plug in different management modules and stuff like that. Pretty freaking amazing looking, and Fedora would make a fantastic sort of management console for that.
Yeah.
Really, but if Fedora could do
yeah. So there's been some interest in that, and so again, I had a slide in my previous version of this where I have the it's made of people thing from Soylent Green. That's basically the case. If anything people want to do in Fedora, we can talk about how great it would be to have this thing, but really, and again, the Fedora Council, we can talk about our objectives, but mostly it's enabling people who want to do something to do that thing. So if 1,000 people showed up and said we're going to make Fedora Mobile, we would say okay, let's do it. But that's not happening. So but it might be happening with the network thing, and it might be happening with Internet of Things. So we'll see what that means. Yeah, before they've all run off now probably. But yes, but I think it's still Fedora 10 or 12. I don't know. 12. Yeah. I know. I talked to someone at the New England Linux Fest, and he said they were working on updating to a newer thing, but it was yeah. 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 The Fedora.
Yeah. Well, the precursor to that, I remember, was only like 12 or 13. So,
Yeah. Possibly, yeah. I don't. We've been doing some pretty awesome Fedora ARM stuff actually, and there's ARM 64-bit ARM that is coming out. That's going to be really nice. A lot of work on that as well. Yeah.
So my comment, question, concern. So I'm an academic role.
Yeah.
And I tend to see that when bug reporting, right? Big deal because you can still order.
Yeah.
So I found that obviously users have problems, they go to Fedora,
right, like if you'd file a bug against Firefox in... Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so some of those things, it works. It really would be better if we could get those filed upstream in a better way. And I think a lot of those developers get a lot of bugs in a lot of different systems. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know a real good answer for that, but it is frustrating. Right. So hopefully, yeah, we should be with getting back to a 6-month release cycle, getting back into alignment with project that starts with a G for releases. So that particular thing shouldn't be so much of an issue. But yeah, it kind of is. Tracking bugs is kind of a hard thing in Fedora because generally. With the ironic exception of that case, a lot of people who are maintaining the packagers aren't really software developers. They are packagers, so they worked on packaging it up. And sometimes they can be an advocate for the user for those bugs, but they might not be able to replicate it themselves, and they might not actually understand what the problem is. They might not understand the code deeply enough. So usually connecting the user with the actual upstream is the better thing to do, but sometimes that doesn't happen so well with the GNOME bugs in Fedora, and I think we're trying to work on that in general. One of the things we actually changed recently, we've traditionally had a process where at the end of life for a release, we close all those bugs and say, reopen this if it's still a bug, which is, it's better than having a bunch of bugs. It's more honest than having a bunch of bugs that no one is going to touch, but it can be kind of frustrating for the users. And one of the frustrations was that only the original bug reporter could reopen it. So if you came along later and wanted to say this was still a problem, you couldn't, and that was kind of just annoying. Now anybody can reopen a bug as long as they reassign it to a newer version. You can say, I tried this in Fedora 21. It's still broken. Come on, fix it. And I think that a lot of those bugs, even if they don't get individual response, kind of help in aggregate, because if we get 10 duplicates of that bug, it indicates that it really needs resources put to it, even if that's kind of frustrating for the users who feel like they didn't get individual attention from that. I don't know if that feels helpful at all, but I think it's the best I've got there.
I'll reiterate.
Yeah.
If you can get it upstream, get it upstream. Because in a lot of cases, once it's gotten down to the Fedora level, it really is packaging. There are guys who can do commits on whatever the project is. It is kind of crappy. You can get involved with upstream.
Yeah, well, and again, back to the topic, some upstreams are much easier, have a lower barrier to entry. Then I think we should open up a bigger upstream with Revolution, because it's not going to don't even connect to the file. So that makes it a little harder.
Yeah, one of the other things I know, this is again, I'm going to go back to the it's made of people. There was a proposal to have a user issue tracker that was basically meant for to not package bugs, but things like this. I've got a problem in Fedora wherever it is, and then somebody would look at that user issue and then go file whatever upstream bugs or connect it in the back end. But again, so someone was working on that. I don't know what the state of it is in, and it's also going to need to have people committed to being those go-between people to make it work. If people are interested, that can happen. It would be awesome. But I don't see people. That's also thankless work, so I don't see people lining up to do that. Yeah. Do many enhancement bugs get filed? Yes, they do. You made Thomas laugh. Yes, enhancement bugs are very popular. And I've filed quite a few enhancement bugs with mixed results. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Again, often if it is a upstream package that the packager is just packaging it, file an enhancement bug does not do much good, because it's not like they're going to go and create that. Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of those are responded to and taken very seriously. Sometimes the enhancement bugs get a little contentious because people are very opinionated in what they think is an enhancement, and Bugzilla is not necessarily the best medium for figuring out the design of things sometimes. But a lot of enhancement bugs do get filed and responded to. Anything else? All right. Thank you all for coming and staying through to the end. I appreciate it.